As children, we search for identity. We look for something to grab onto and say, this is me. What exactly ends up filling that role will vary wildly. Some of us find sports, others a video game series. Many of us are drawn to a particular movie or TV franchise. When I was 7 years old, I found mine. I've talked before about Luke Skywalker being one of my first heroes, and Star Trek II was the first movie to break my heart. But from the age of 7, there was one thing that called to me in a completely different way. It was while visiting family in Canada. There was a movie on TV. It had come out 3 years earlier, but hadn't yet found its way to me. A movie that made me say, for the first time, that's what I want to be when I grow up. It had the perfect setup, creepy music, a lone librarian doing her rounds, floating books, rising tension, then a scream.
If there's something strange in the neighborhood, who you gonna call?
Ghostbusters blew my young mind. I was a scared kid. I had nightmares all the time. I wouldn't sleep without the light on. Ghosts and monsters terrified me. But here were 4 guys with no special powers who were not only scared like me, but found a way to be heroes. With wits, brains, and the right tools, they could save the day. And if they could do that, so could I. Welcome to the workshop. My name is Paul, aka Wordmaker. When I say I was obsessed with Ghostbusters, I am not exaggerating. I played Ghostbusters with friends. I had the toys, I had the comics, the video games. I never missed an episode of the cartoon. If it had the No Ghost logo on it, I wanted it. I even made my own proton pack out of a cereal box. So what makes Ghostbusters so special? It had a somewhat troubled production, going through multiple script drafts. The crew had to work long shifts without permits to get the exterior shots in New York. There was complaints from businesses and residents because of the disruption to the streets. And of course, there was the infamous negotiations with Universal Studios to actually get permission to use the name Ghostbusters. It had a massive budget for the time, estimated at between $25 and $30 million. A big gamble for a new property whose primary selling point was the Saturday Night Live alums in the cast. In spite of all this, Ghostbusters had a crisp, witty script, charismatic actors with years of experience working together, which gave them clear on-screen chemistry. It had the grandfather of all movie theme songs, special effects which still hold up to this day, and the greatest and most on-the-nose needle drop in cinema history. I am not taking questions at this time.
Saving the day. Saving the day. When you get to the point where it's driving you insane. Saving the day. Saving the day.
It wound up taking in $282.2 million in initial box office sales, putting it behind only Beverly Hills Cop in terms of gross revenue for 1984. It became a cultural phenomenon, spawning 2 animated series, multiple comics and video games, a 2016 reboot, and currently 3 sequels with talk of further installments in the works. It may not be Marvel or Star Wars, but Ghostbusters means so much to so many. And I'm going to talk about why it means so much to me. I'll go over our rules for those of you who are new to the channel. Rule number 1, nothing is ever just good or bad. Art is subjective, and so the goal here is to explore why a movie makes us feel a certain way, not to argue over whether or not we feel the right way about it. Rule number 2, every point we make must be backed up from the text. In this case, the text refers to the movie itself. This means no fan theories, no deleted scenes, and taking the movie as it stands on its own. Although, this is Ghostbusters, so I'm allowed to cheat a little. And lastly, rule number 3. There is a difference between our opinion of a narrative decision and understanding the impact it has on the story being told. We're focused on the latter. For example, I think environmental regulation is incredibly important, especially today, and it's something to be protected, not dismissed out of hand as government overreach. But the use of Walter Peck and the EPA can still show us what the movie's trying to say. I'll come back to that later. That out of the way, let's get to work. I was a pretty superstitious kid. I was raised Catholic and grew up on Irish folk tales. I never walked under ladders. I was afraid of breaking mirrors. I flinched if I ever stepped on a grave, and I would never disturb a fairy fort. Actually, that last one isn't all that unique to me. Ask any Irish person. We all have stories of someone who messed with a fairy fort and lived to regret it. Most stories involving the supernatural offer a rejection of science and technology. Vampires have nothing to fear from guns and bullets, so to fight them, our heroes resort to more primitive tools like bows and arrows, knives, axes, or just hammering a wooden stake through their heart. They depend on mystical defenses like holy water and sunlight. In our classic movie monster pantheon, the closest we see to modern weapons being effective is using a silver bullet to kill a werewolf. But given the difficulty in making or acquiring one, their use is limited to small pistols. Ghosts and demons can often only be fought off with magic, religious talismans, or psychic powers. They may be held off with salt or repelled by iron. And true defeat requires rituals like exorcism or destroying an ancient artifact. The efforts of the heroes to confront supernatural threats usually requires knowledge of and faith in their respective mystical traits. But Ghostbusters plays things differently. Our heroes don't rely on myth and legend. They take evidence gained from direct experience and study, and figure out their own science-based ways to deal with the problem. All the methods for detecting ghosts, assessing how dangerous they are, and catching them comes from observation and analysis. Egon monitors and tracks spiritual activity with his PKE meter, which detects psychokinetic energy, an indicator of the strength of a supernatural presence. Ray references the ionization rate of ectoplasmic entities, and we know the Ghostbusters use proton packs to catch ghosts. Taking into account how Dan Aykroyd has talked about the science and the physics behind the equipment, told you I'm allowed to cheat in this one, we can determine that the particle streams their packs use are positively charged, while the energy binding ghosts together has a negative charge. Basic school-level science tells us that positive and negative are attracted to each other, so the particle streams logically weaken ghosts and hold them in place. With Egon's input, it's a small leap to say then that the traps and containment unit operate on similar principles. The Ghostbusters use their knowledge and expertise to confront threats on their own terms, rather than facing supernatural on a playing field that is levied against them. The team's approach to the paranormal inherently shapes how they handle the job. Bankman sees the paranormal primarily as a business opportunity, something he can profit off of as an owner and CEO. Winston, on the other end of things, is happy to accept anything that's thrown at him as long as he's paid a fair salary. Ray and Egon, meanwhile, are more focused on the theory and the history of the paranormal. Their driving focus is to study and learn. They approach the paranormal as an area of science, something which can be studied and understood, just like physics or chemistry. But despite the differences in their initial attitudes and motivations, the Ghostbusters treat the realm of the paranormal with respect for the power and potential danger it represents. When Egon warns them about the growing level of psychokinetic energy in the city, he's taken seriously. When they realize that Dane's apartment building is going to become a doorway for Gozer to come to our world and destroy it, the first instinct of every one of them is to figure out what to do about it. Egon's warnings aren't based on prophecy or premonition, as they might be in any other story. Instead, he bases his assessment on studying observable phenomena and the history he and Ray have learned of the building and its architect, Ivo Shandor.
According to this morning's sample, it would be a Twinkie 35 feet long, weighing approximately 600 pounds.
That's a big Twinkie.
Everything about their understanding of the threat comes from research and logical deduction. This is not to say that Ghostbusters disregards mysticism and spirituality. Far from it. Egon tells the team that the design of the roof cap on Dana's building is the same as NASA's instruments for tracking deep space pulsars. And Ray expands on this, explaining that this allows the entire building to draw in spiritual energy. This blending of science and mysticism harkens to New Age beliefs about the connection between quantum physics and magic. And it's not surprising that it's something that would feature in Dan Aykroyd's writing, as he's known for having a deep belief in the paranormal.
Hey, Ray, do you believe in God?
Never met him.
Yeah, well, I do. And I love Jesus' style, you know.
Though not a scientist, Winston is a Christian, and it's him who brings up the possibility that the dead are rising from the grave, becoming the first in the team to speculate that the end of the world is coming and directly referencing the Book of Revelations. And when the team arrives at the apartment building to confront Gozer, we see clergy members from several religions along with banners calling on people to repent. After Gozer's first attempt to frighten off our heroes fails, these people turn from praying to chanting as they join in the rest of the crowd in cheering on the Ghostbusters. Faith and spirituality are presented as positive things for a person to have, giving strength and perspective. But even so, they are no substitute for taking action. When the time comes to act, we have to show up and put our full support behind those who can make a difference, even in the face of Armageddon. It's worth noting that the one time the Ghostbusters do try to play by the rules of the supernatural, to apply a mystical solution to a problem when asked to choose a form for Gozer, it fails spectacularly. Some enemies cannot be beaten while playing their game. Sometimes the system is rigged against you. Sometimes you have to make the fight happen on your terms and use tactics the other side wouldn't consider. This is when Egon decides that they have to take a calculated risk by crossing the streams, but this is still based on his rational assessment of the situation. Ghostbusters has often been called a celebration of Reagan-era economics, with its small business, blue-collar heroes who have to square up against government overregulation. I'm not going to spend too much time picking apart conservative or libertarian politics, but I am going to present my own thoughts on Walter Peck and how his character and actions speak to the film's themes. Let's get something out of the way first. I don't think Bacon was wrong to refuse to allow Peck to see the containment unit. For one thing, while I'm no legal expert, nothing about the Ghostbusters business would appear to fall under the remit of the Environmental Protection Agency. Their equipment can be dangerous, for sure, but the particle accelerators, and likely the atomic containment unit by extension, would fall under the authority of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, not the EPA. For another, as any lawyer will tell you, never let the cops search your home without a warrant. Peck is not a cop, strictly speaking, but the same applies. It's just good sense. With that aside, let's look at Peck's behavior and characterization. Walter Peck is first seen waiting for Venkman in his office. He's dressed in a pristine three-piece suit with a dress shirt and collar pin. He has coiffed hair and designer stubble. He looks more like a politician or a yuppie corporate executive than a civil servant, and you'd easily believe he's hardly worth a day in his life. Compared to the blue-collar Ghostbusters, Walter Peck is a one-percenter. Worse than that, he is clearly unqualified for his position. Let's break this down. Peck is specifically accusing the Ghostbusters of storing hazardous waste and believes they spread hallucinogenic nerve gases to make people believe they're seeing ghosts. He presents no evidence for this, aside from not believing in ghosts himself. So he's approaching this from a prejudiced perspective, cherry-picking what facts will support his assumptions. If Peck had factual reasons to think the Ghostbusters were dangerous, wouldn't it make more sense to get the Nuclear Regulatory Commission involved? We see a copy of Omni magazine in the Ghostbusting montage with a proton pack on the cover. Omni ran from 1978 to 1997 and featured articles about science and parapsychology as well as short works of sci-fi and fantasy fiction. So the Ghostbusters weren't exactly being secretive about how their equipment works. we have to conclude, for whatever reason, that the NRC doesn't feel a need to investigate the business. However, Peck is acting on assumptions. He's decided, going in, that the Ghostbusters are lying and concocted a whole story about what they're really doing. He's looking for evidence to prove his beliefs, rather than allowing the evidence to form his beliefs. And when he can neither find nor produce any evidence to back them up, he doubles down, insisting that he's right. Any good scientist will tell you this is a dangerous stance to take. It inherently leads to inaccurate conclusions and unwise decisions. But it's also possible that, like many people like him, Peck lacks the courage of his convictions. The objective may matter more to him than the justification or even the method. He explicitly calls out Benton for insulting him in their first meeting, making it clear that his second visit to the firehouse is an act of retaliation. This is an unprofessional attitude for anyone in a position of authority. And look at how Peck handles the situation. He brings one cop and one electrical technician into an environment he claims is full of hazardous chemicals. Where's the protective gear? Why is there no one trained in how to examine and handle chemical agents? They don't even have a swab kit to take samples. When rightly confronted by Janine, Peck brandishes paperwork, but doesn't let her read any of it. He might just be dismissive of secretarial staff, but even when dealing with Egon, one of the actual Ghostbusters and one of the designers of the equipment they're arguing about, Peck doesn't present the paperwork. He's obfuscating his every move. Maybe he's got just enough to get his foot in the door and little else. But it's telling that he won't allow the due process of letting anyone see the actual terms of the document he's carrying. Egon correctly points out that Peck is on private property and does everything he can to explain that turning off the containment unit would be dangerous. Peck won't listen. He won't even listen to the Con Ed worker who expresses concern over his unfamiliarity with the equipment. And I have to wonder, if Peck's concern is about the storage of chemicals, what does he expect to achieve by shutting off the protection grid? Turning off the lights doesn't make hazardous chemicals less hazardous, Walter. That's not how chemistry works, Walter. He lets his crusade get the better of him. And the more he's proven wrong, the more he's made a fool of, the more he digs his heels in. Because for people like Walter Peck, it serves their interests more to act like they're right than to actually be right.
States, every single state. Changed the vote. Every single state. And you.
Wow! All the networks!
This is a working class film about people trying to get by and do the right thing. But it also respects the knowledge and competence of subject matter experts. For years now, we've been hearing how people are tired of experts. But Ghostbusters shows us not only that experts are worth listening to, not only is there no need to create an artificial divide between experts and the working class, but that cooperation between the two is essential. Without it, we're just waiting for the end of the world to crush us while dressed as a 100-foot corporate mascot. This is a movie that celebrates everyday heroism, where people whose job is basically pest control can provide the most valuable service. Believe me, if you've ever had to tackle a wasp nest on your own, you'll know how true that is. But it's also a movie that teaches us things. Listen to experts. Support the people who are trying to help others. Maybe don't let reactionary hotheads with a taste for retribution get into positions of power. And above all, if there's something strange going on, if you see something wrong and you're someone who can help, answer that call, because you just might save the day. Thanks for watching, everyone. I've been looking forward to this for a long time now. It definitely won't be my last word on Ghostbusters. For now, I'm going to go play Spirits Unleashed. Hit me up over there on Wordmaker. Let's show them how we do things downtown. Please like, share, subscribe. Drop over to patreon.com/wordmaker to support the channel. Back up your sources. Take care, and I'll see you next time.